This was Vice President Harris's first real unscripted setting where voters could see and hear her explain some of her policy positions now and how they differ from before she became vice president.
Oh no, an unscripted setting. You beware the unscripted setting. She's accustomed to scripted settings. Like Dana Bash, she's accustomed to scripted settings too. It's different being a Democrat. So Kamala Harris did her CNN interview, and I watched. The old rules apply so that you don't have to. And so that Michael Piercy doesn't have to also. The big interview on CNN, and who was there? Who was at her? That was the patriarchy sitting next to her, I think. The old white guy sitting next to her. You know, the Iraq war combat vet who carried a weapon of war in a war zone, right? That's... the retired command sergeant major. It's okay. It's good to be a Democrat. Dana Bash did ask him about that weapon of war line, and he dodged it completely and ran all over the reservation. Not to bring Elizabeth Warren into this, but ran all over the reservation. Didn't answer the question at all, of course, and that was worthy of note. And Dana Bash, to her credit, did she like Jen Psaki? She circled back. She did come back. Dana Bash asked some questions that were actual questions that ought to be asked. The art of the follow-up is something that has been lost on pretty much all journalists. I'm making quotation marks with my fingers. Dana Bash did go back and follow up on a couple of dodged questions. I think maybe two. Now, the interview, as I understand it, ran a total of 27 minutes. You get rid of the commercials and all that stuff. And there were stories coming out all over the place that it was going to go 18 minutes. It would be 18 minutes. But I believe it ran 27 minutes. I think that's the final verdict on all of that. And it was done, the interview was done in Georgia at a black-owned restaurant, because you have to racialize everything before you even begin. Just choosing the location, they racialized the interview, because CNN, I'm going to guess that the Kamala team Kamala had something to do with that too. And there's a CNN, an online CNN like chat room of CNN employees and former employees. And very early on, there were people observing, oh, the lighting is terrible. TV people, they notice the lighting. So the lighting is terrible, and especially Tim Walz, he's in the shadows and stuff. You can't do a bad job of lighting her. That would be racist. For CNN, but Tim Walz is the patriarchy, so you can light him badly, and there were those lighting issues, and the set and setting were a little bit weird, I think, but whatever, that's not a huge deal. That's just CNN's production thing, which, nobody's good at anything anymore, and CNN certainly isn't good at anything anymore, but it was an interesting episode to watch. And speaking of Tim Walz, and his heroic efforts in Iraq, carrying a rifle in a combat zone and all that stuff, which he didn't do, and retiring as a command sergeant major, which he didn't do, but he laid claim to again and again. It turns out that the heroic Democrat governor of the state of Maryland, which is a block or two from where I sit right now, not the whole state, but the state line right over there, because I'm in the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., which is not a state at all, and it's best that way. Bronze Star recipient, ? Wes Moore, the Democrat governor of Maryland, and a hero. And the Democrats, he's African-American, so the Democrats are talking about him as the next president of the United States, because it's all race for them. They're still trying to make up for being the Confederate States of America in the Civil War and being the party of lynching and Jim Crow and standing in schoolhouse doors. But Bronze Star recipient, ? Wes Moore seen failing to correct record again in past interview. And this is kind of an interesting story, because it's the Fox News channel in Baltimore, Maryland, that did the story 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago, in 2022. And the New York Times today is getting all the credit in the world for doing a story almost as though they're a journalistic organization, which we know they're not. But the New York Times is getting all the credit in the world for having a story on Governor Wes Moore, Democrat, African-American, future king of the world, and all things in it because he's black. And he did serve in the Army, and he did go to Afghanistan, and he was in the 82nd Airborne. He was not, however, awarded the Bronze Star Medal. He has been laying claim for years to the Bronze Star Medal, and it turns out the New York Times, Wes Moore and the Bronze Star he claimed but never received. Claimed but never received. That's the headline in the New York Times. And they try to soft sell it. They're smoothing it over because they want to massage him into the White House a few years from now, too. But the New York Post actually did the story correctly, unlike the New York Times. And the Associated Press, being a gang of Democrat Party frontmen and women, presumably, and some in between. Moore, speaking of Governor Wes Moore, Moore says he made an honest mistake. They have honest mistake in question marks. Failing to correct application, claiming Bronze Star. It's more than an application, though, and the Associated Press is intellectually lazy, journalistically lazy, fundamentally corrupt and dishonest. I just did a little bit of research this morning, and I wasn't doing a story on it for the Associated Press or the New York Times, but I found him, Wes Moore, on, for example, the Stephen Colbert program on the CBS television network, and he was asked by Stephen Colbert, well, you went to Afghanistan and you were in the Army and you received the Bronze Star, and he said, yep, and he nods. So he's verbally lied about it, visually lied about it. He's lied about it repeatedly. It wasn't an honest mistake. It was a repeated falsehood. And it's not he's not the first Democrat, and Tim Walz not the first Democrat. Remember Da Nang Dick, for example, Democrat Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut. And he repeatedly lied about being a combat Marine who served in Vietnam. Now, he wore the Marine Corps uniform. He was in the Marine Corps, but he didn't go to Vietnam. Still, he claimed repeatedly that he went to Vietnam. You should be proud that you served in the Marine Corps. That's plenty, but never mind that. And, of course, Tim Walz lied about his military rank. He lied that, I was in Iraq and I carried a rifle in a war zone, a weapon of war in a war zone. And then he talked about in the vaguest of terms being in Afghanistan for a ceremony where the remains of American servicemen was being put onto an airplane. And it turned out that was not the way it was represented. So now we've got Wes Moore, who lied. And look, he served in the Army, and he went to Afghanistan, and he was in the 82nd Airborne. He did not receive the Bronze Star Medal, and now he's got an elaborate story about how his deputy company commander, or whatever it was recommending him for the Bronze Star Medal, but it never happened. But he just went ahead and kept claiming. Senator John Kerry, Boltneck, as the children know him. Boltneck, of course, slandered U.S. soldiers at a Senate hearing and called our American war veterans war criminals and then he talked about all the, well, his is more complicated, but you know about that too. Remarkable stuff. You've got other Democrats as well, Congressman Clyde Shavers, who talked about being a naval submarine officer and wasn't. Congressman Andy Kim, who said he was a high-ranking military advisor, directing foreign wars with top generals, but not true. Democrats do this kind of stuff a lot. Joe Biden claims that he won World War II by himself. Okay, he didn't really claim that, but we got that. I've also got news for you on the Supreme Court. The Democrats, they want to pack the Supreme Court. And I was talking about this the other day, but this is something that Republicans should talk about and conservatives should talk about. The Democrats had put a lot of people onto the Supreme Court over the years, and there was a Democrat nominees to the Supreme Court dominated the Supreme Court for the better part of the last century. You had Democrat presidents nominating Democrats to serve on the Supreme Court. And in fact, the Democrats had the balance of power, if you want to look at it that way, on the Supreme Court. You're supposed to be, a jurist and not a political actor. It seems like pretty much all, if not all, of the Democrat nominees are in fact political actors. And some don't know what women are. Still can't tell you what a woman is. Even though they're ladies, hey, you're a lady, you're a woman. You don't have to, but she's not a biologist still. But the Democrats have had the balance of power on the Supreme Court for the better part of the last century. And not once did the Republicans come out and say that they wanted to pack the court, right? That they wanted to enforce. And the ethics rules, which this is just more political hooey. Speaking of which, my friend Mark Paoletta points out that Joe Biden, who's on vacation in Delaware at the beach after finishing a vacation at a billionaire's private ranch in California in the beautiful San Ynez Valley, Mark Paoletta observes it's the 17th time that Joe Biden is staying for free at the home of a billionaire Democrat Party donor. Mansions, ranches, and Joe Biden 17 times now staying at a billionaire's property and saying, Supreme Court justices can't stay at their friend's house because that's a violation of something. But for Joe Biden, of course, that's okay. 17 vacations at a billionaire's property, and all of the billionaires, coincidentally, are Democrat Party donors, which means that they have an agenda with the government, and they have the president's ear because the president's sleeping in their guest bedroom and maybe even the master bedroom. They can't call it a master bedroom, though, because that conjures up images of the Democrats and their plantations and the bullwhip and all that stuff. And, Joe Biden's the guy who says when it's quitting time on terra. So 17 times Joe Biden stayed for free at a billionaire donor's mansion. And still he's like, the Supreme Court can't do what I do. Remarkable stuff. He was staying last week at the $37 million ranch of his buddy, a billionaire, who's a big Democrat donor. And that's okay, of course, because Democrats, were it not for double standards, liberals would have no standards at all. Amazing stuff. Also, here's a remarkable thing, and again, my friend Mark Paoletta on X, he posted a letter to ABC News executives. ABC News will be hosting the presidential debate, which will theoretically happen between Kamala Harris, current vice president, and former President Donald Trump. ABC, a Democrat Party front group, is hosting that. 4 former attorneys general of the United States of America have sent a letter saying, hey, you've got to ask at the debate, ask Kamala Harris in particular about packing the Supreme Court and the left. We had Chuck Schumer out there threatening the lives of Supreme Court justices, and then an armed lunatic showed up at Brett Kavanaugh's home with a gun and extra magazines, extra ammo, kidnapping tools, burglary tools, because he was planning on killing multiple Supreme Court justices. The Democrats have stirred this up. The Democrats, we were talking about it yesterday, have said that, including Joe Biden, that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy and a threat to everything. And then he was shot by a would-be assassin who nearly killed Donald Trump, the bullet grazing his head, only after he turned to the right to look over there. Had he not, it would have been the Zapruder film, but never mind that. The Democrat Party and all that they stand for, all that they represent. The oldest racist organization in the United States of America, the Democrat Party. The most violent, the most terroristic organization in the United States, the Democrat Party, because they gave us everything from the KKK to the Symbionese Liberation Army, to the Students for a Democratic Society, to the Weather Underground, the Democrat Party, to Black Lives Matter, to Antifa, the party of terrorism in the United States of America. Amazing. Who's killed more people in the United States in violent political actions, the Democrat Party or Al-Qaeda? The Democrat Party or radical Islam? Keep September 11th in there, of course, but, the Democrats have been murdering people for centuries now in the name of their politics. All right, but we've got Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in their sit-down powwow with Dana Bash. That's one of the big ones today. And we are at 888-630-9625. So we have all that to get to and more of the Venezuelan gangs taking over Aurora, Colorado, not a border city, because the Democrats want more murder. And so we will get more murder in the United States because the Democrats have a lot of power. And they want more murder and mayhem and gangs and home invasions and looting. And, Democrats want more of it. We get more of it. Let's go to the telephones, Michael. Let's go to Connor calling from Huntsville, Alabama. Connor, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, Chris.
Hey.
This is the caller formerly referred to as James.
Formerly James, now Connor.
Yes, but I still reserve the right to be wrong because, unlike you, I frequently am. Listen, the Democrats may as well have Foster Brooks and Walter Mitty on their ticket. They are really, really disastrous. And last night on X, the Kamala fan club started blaming Dana Brooks for the train wreck. It just reminded me of Marion Barry saying, the set me up.
Yeah. The GDB really set me up.
Yeah. And lastly, cognitive dissonance should really hurt a lot. Would have less of it because you can't have the Green New Deal and then believe in fracking and drilling. If cognitive dissonance really was painful, maybe we'd have a lot less to deal with.
That's true. Now, look, when you're a Democrat, Connor, a.k.a. James, you can maintain these two conflicting positions at the same time. You can be the tie-breaking vote on the Green New Deal, get the Green New Deal through, which will end all known forms of energy on planet Earth, and certainly get rid of fracking and reduce petroleum to zero, which is the goal of the environmental radicals, and she is one. And at the same time, you can then come out and say, oh, no, I'm not for banning fracking, even though last time I talked about it, I was for banning fracking, which is a big problem for them politically in Pennsylvania. And that's all they care about, Connor, is the votes in Pennsylvania and winning power so they can cause havoc and destroy the world as we know it, fundamentally transform America. But she can be both. Fast-moving world out there, isn't it? A lot going on. Everywhere you look, every time you look up. A lot of stuff. Overwhelmingly because of the Democrats who drive the train on so many different things. Now, this is pointed out to me, and it's worth bringing up. I remember this, and I got a text this morning from a friend of mine, from Bill, who points out, and we were talking about Wes Moore, and we have some audio of Wes Moore, the current governor of the state of Maryland, who the Democrats are pushing as a possible presidential candidate because he's African American. He is, I think maybe Joe Biden would say, the second mainstream black guy to come along who's articulate and bright and clean, as Joe Biden once described Barack Obama, the first mainstream black guy to come along, and who was articulate and bright and clean. I remember it because it's ABC, articulate, bright, and clean. That's my trick for remembering that.
I mean, you got the first sort of mainstream African American who was articulate and bright and clean and a nice-looking guy. I mean, that's a storybook, man.
Yeah. That's a storybook, man. That's a storybook. And now comes Wes Moore, and he might be the second, according to Joe Biden, who is still looking for Corn Pop. Where's Corn Pop? I want to find corn. The news media should have found corn pop. But we've got Wes Moore. Wes Moore, who is, we went and found, and it turns out it was on Stephen Colbert's Comedy Central show, even before he was given the late night show on CBS, on the CBS television network. But Wes Moore, who had served in the Army honorably and went to Afghanistan, and he's got a fairly impressive resume, but he's been claiming for years to have been awarded a Bronze Star Medal, and it turns out that is not the case. He did not. But here is Democrat Governor Wes Moore on the television with Stephen Colbert, and this is from 2010, which is 14 years ago now, if you're doing the math. And Wes Moore was asked by Stephen Colbert, "So you served in the Army?" And they're like, "Oh, they always pretend that they're happy because it's one of them." And they're like, "Oh, see, we got one." And half the time they're lying about stuff. So here's the moment with Stephen Colbert and now Governor Wes Moore on his Bronze Star Medal.
You're a decorated veteran of the Afghan War,
yes,
correct? Get the Bronze Star.
Okay.
Woo!
Now, I am no
Yes.
fan of the smarty pants, but you are a Rhodes Scholar as well.
Yes.
He said, yeah, and he nodded. With you're a decorated veteran, Bronze Star. And he said, yeah, and he nodded, which is untruthful. It's untruthful. But my friend Bill this morning reminded me of something that I hadn't thought of in this context, at least. And actually, while I was at the Pentagon, assigned to the Pentagon when I worked for what was then a news organization, I was assigned to the Pentagon. My office was in the Pentagon. It's where I went to work every day for about 10 years. The chief of naval operations, was a man named Michael Borda. And he was a good guy. I knew him. We had, I think, traveled together a bit and certainly had meals together and cocktails together. And Admiral Borda, who was, interestingly, he was the first enlisted sailor to then become an officer and then become the chief of naval operations, the CNO, a four-star admiral in charge of the entire U.S. Navy. And Admiral Borda committed suicide while I was at the Pentagon. And I knew him and I liked him. He was a very nice guy. He was a very regular guy, down-to-earth guy. In fact, I was with him in one day when a group of school children were present, and they're like, "Oh, and here's Admiral Borda. He's the chief now." And one of the kids asked him. He had a rack of medals on his chest, of course. And one of the kids asked him, "So what are those for?" And he pointed to the first one and said, "This one is for eating all my vegetables, and this one is for listening to my mom whenever she tells me the right thing to do." And the kids like, ooh, and they're very excited. He was right. But in any case, he committed suicide by shooting himself and killing himself May 16th of 1996. And there's the official residence of the chief of naval operations in the Washington Navy Yard in Washington. And he committed suicide because he had been challenged having to do with one of the awards that he wore on his uniform. See, because there was this guy, David Hackworth, who had he was a Vietnam War vet. I knew David Hackworth also. And Admiral Borda had two Bronze Stars, and he had a V device for valor that was affixed to one of his Bronze Star medals. And David Hackworth argued that he was not entitled to wear the V device on the Bronze Star medal. And that so upset Admiral Borda that it shocked everybody, of course, that he actually committed suicide. And he left a letter or two letters, I think, talking about how he felt that he had been disgraced by this investigation by David Hackworth, who was a very heavily decorated Vietnam War vet and then became a journalist of sorts. And he wrote this story about Admiral Borda, the chief of naval operations, displaying a V device on one of his Bronze Star medals that he was not entitled to wear. And it was so traumatic to Admiral Borda that he killed himself with a gun. He shot himself in the chest, no less, and killed himself, I remember, in the yard of the official residence of the Chief of Naval Operations and on a bench. And it was quite an episode in 1996 in the military and at the Pentagon, Chief of Naval Operations killing himself, but pretty remarkable stuff. And I guess it said reports that Borda indicate wearing 2 different V devices on 2 service ribbons that said that it had not been intentional and it wasn't a deception, but he felt so humiliated by this that he committed suicide. Now, I don't expect Wes Moore to do that. I don't expect Wes Moore to commit suicide, but he's been going around falsely claiming that he was awarded the Bronze Star Medal in Afghanistan while he was in the Army, in the 82nd Airborne. And I just don't understand that. You know, you served in the Army honorably. You served in Afghanistan. That's enough, guys. You don't have to embellish. Don't have to sugarcoat. Isn't that stuff amazing? Terrible. So, wild stories there. And Admiral Borda. Hadn't thought about Admiral Borda in quite a while.
Wes Moore just got asked about this on TV.
Wes Moore was was he on CNN?
Fox 5.
Really? He was on Fox 5 TV this morning. Fox 5 here in Washington, D.C. And because there's a New York Times story on the Bronze Star Medal today. And he's already told, I think he already told the New York Times, it's an honest mistake. But he's done it over and over again. And again, we played from 14 years ago talking to Stephen Colbert, says Bronze Star Medal, and he says, yep, and he nods in agreement. And even the New York Times now saying Wes Moore on the Bronze Star, he claimed but never received. And the New York Post has a better story. But let's go to Wes Moore, because Michael just found the Fox Channel 5, Washington, D.C., and they asked him about it this morning.
Questions about the Bronze Star status. I just want to hit you on that real quick and let you kind of clear the air as to what happened.
I want to let you clear the air.
I take full accountability for an honest mistake that was made on an application that I sent out nearly 20 years ago. I'm incredibly proud of my service. I'm incredibly proud of the soldiers and the paratroopers that I led in combat.
It's an honest mistake that he made on an application for a White House fellowship. But what about all the times you were asked about it during interviews and you did not disabuse the interviewers of the false notion that you had been awarded the Bronze Star? Now, let's see if the Fox News reporter is trying to be respectful and say, let me give you a chance to clear the air. It's a New York Times story, believe it or not. But that's interesting. So he was asked about it.
So a lot of this, and when you say it was an honest mistake, this was between you and your commanding officer, and you kind of thought that this was done, or at least your commanding officer thought that this was a done deal, right?
Yeah. My commanding officer not only nominated me, he instructed me to put it on the application, and he's actually already resubmitted the paperwork because he found out a couple days ago.
Already?
He's like, I thought you got it. So he's actually resubmitted the paperwork. But, I take full accountability. It was my application. But I also know that the service that we did overseas, I'm really proud of what we did in Afghanistan.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, that's not a bad job by the reporter there, but he's got the political BS story ready to go. And now he got his commanding officer is resubmitting all these years later. He's resubmitting the Bronze Star because that's kind of a remarkable thing, isn't it? Yes, it is. On his Wikipedia page, it shows that he achieved the rank of captain, served in the 82nd Airborne, one of the great Army units in the history of Army units, served in Afghanistan, was awarded the National Defense Service Medal, the Afghanistan Campaign Medal, the Armed Forces Reserve Medal, the Army Service Ribbon, Parachutist Badge, Combat Action Badge. So that is... that ought to be just fine. And his Wikipedia page doesn't say anything about the Bronze Star Medal. But that's an honest mistake. It's an honest mistake that you made again and again in interviews. And even the New York Times makes note of it. The New York Post, of course, does a better job of covering the story because they're not Democrat Party fluffers. But the New York Post story, Maryland Governor Wes Moore falsely claimed to be a Bronze Star recipient on White House fellowship application, says it was, quote, an honest mistake, And that's what he said today. Now, he knew, and again, he's telling Stephen Colbert and the audience and saying yes and nodding and a yes, I have the Bronze Star Medal. It's something that you would know as an Army captain, whether you were awarded the Bronze Star. You might have it as a lapel pin, or and certainly you would have the Bronze Star Medal itself. But when you're a Democrat, their brains work differently. Democrat brains are wired differently. Democratic Maryland Governor Wes Moore claimed Thursday that it was an honest mistake when he lied about being a prestigious Bronze Star recipient on a 2006 White House fellowship application. Now, 2006 is, of course, the W. Bush administration. Moore, who was 27 years old when he applied for the White House position, blamed his Army superiors for the inclusion of the falsehood on the application and said he never corrected the mistake because he was eager to, quote, begin the next phase. That's what he said, begin the next phase of his life. In a statement released after the New York Times reported on the embellishment. It's an embellishment. When you're a Democrat, it's an embellishment. And Democrats evolve. They don't flip-flop. It's good to be a Democrat for a lot of reasons. The Maryland governor wrote in a lengthy statement, he said, "These are the facts. While serving overseas with the Army, I was encouraged to fill out an application for the White House Fellowship by my deputy brigade commander. In fact, he helped me edit it before I sent it in. At the time, he had recommended me for the Bronze Star. He told me to include the Bronze Star Award on my application after confirming with two other senior level officers that they had also signed off on the commendation." That's what he said in his letter. Moore noted that he never received the Bronze Star Medal, however. Moore noted that his deputy brigade commander felt comfortable with instructing me to include the award on the application for the White House Fellowship because he was under the impression that the medal for heroic or meritorious service had already been approved by his senior leadership. And I can't speak to that. I don't know if that's true or not. But now this morning, he's telling Fox Channel 5 in Washington, D.C., that his deputy brigade commander, whoever it was, is reapplying for the Bronze Star long after the fact, which is kind of interesting, I suppose. And I don't know if you can do that. He left the United States Army 10 years ago in 2014, and I guess now he could still get the Bronze Star Medal for things going on back then. Quite interesting indeed. Quite interesting. So we got that going for Wes Moore. Look, when you're a Democrat, this will be swept under the rug. This is no big deal. He did serve in the Army, and he served as a captain, and he went to Afghanistan, unlike Tim Walz, claiming that he went to Iraq, and it sounds like he served quite honorably. And that should be enough. But when people say, and you received the Bronze Star Medal, don't say, yep, and agree and nod while the crowd applauds. Also, during his 2022 run for governor, he was credited with receiving the Bronze Star during media interviews, plural. Never cleared it up, never indicated he had not received the award, according to the Associated Press, no less. He did not explain why he failed to correct the record. Today, he had, kind of a smiling, laughing it off. Oh, this is no problem because I'm a Democrat, don't you know? I'm getting inputs over here about a number of things, including Admiral Borda. And you find things on the internet that from the time, the charge was that Admiral Borda wore a Navy Achievement Medal and a Navy Commendation Medal with the V for Valor device. And David Hackworth, who was a very interesting guy for a lot of reasons, never actually wrote on it before the suicide. I think it was in the pipeline, though, wasn't it? Yeah, Newsweek was going to publish on the V devices, but he did if I remember correctly, Hackworth write, and he was a fascinating guy, David Hackworth, but he did write about it after the suicide of Borda. So let's see. Let's go, because Jasmine is here. Let's go to Rich, calling from Manassas, Virginia. Rich, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Good morning, Chris.
Hey, Rich.
Thank you for taking. Hi, I wanted to. I worked for Admiral Borda, and was here in D.C. when he was the Chief of Naval Personnel, and I'd like to give a reasonable rationale and motive for why Admiral Borda committed suicide. I don't believe it was because he wore a medal or an award he didn't earn. Mm-hmm. In reality, and this was shared to me by a flag officer, that at the time, the annual flag officer dinner at the Washington Navy Yard, they scrubbed Admiral Borda with a wire brush because he had, in a sense, aided and abetted the enemy. Let's remember the time frame. There was great change.
I should tell you we've got about a minute before the clock runs out. Not to rush you, but I just want to let you know.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah. What happened was that Representative Patricia Schroeder used the tail hook fallout to force the Navy to make changes that they could not get through Congress, and that was things like putting women in combat situations. But a good ration, or for people to remember, on the bridge over the River Kwai, Sir Alec Guinness, at the end, he said, "What have I done?"
Yeah.
He realized he had aided and abetted the enemy, and that's really why he killed himself. People don't. An accomplished gentleman like that will not kill himself over the fact that he wore the wrong ribbon. Okay.
And how? What's this aiding and abetting? And the music is coming up, so I have no time left. But real quick,
aiding and abetting was he helped Patricia Schroeder put females in combat situations.
I see. Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, Pat Schroeder, Congresswoman Patricia Schroeder, was certainly no friend of the Navy, no friend of the military. I see, and you believe that was the humiliation.